right? And if you told a joke and it bombed, you just stood there like a dummy, like that, you know what I mean? You know the feeling.
From the very first moment you hear the name Milton Berle, most people think of laughter, bright lights, and a man whose energy could fill an entire room. He was Mr. Television, the star who took a tiny, flickering screen and transformed it into a phenomenon that no one had ever imagined. Families across America would gather around their TV sets just to see him perform, waiting eagerly for the next joke, the next laugh, the next astonishing stunt. Millions adored him, and for a time it seemed as if he had the world at his feet. But behind that golden smile and sparkling suit, there was a story almost no one knew, a story of loneliness, of secret battles with depression, and a private life filled with heartache that the public would never see. While the cameras captured the jokes, the applause, and the glamour, they missed the shadows lurking just beneath. Milton Berle was a man who could make a nation laugh, yet he could not always find laughter within himself. Fame, wealth, and influence surrounded him, but these were not enough to shield him from the emptiness that crept quietly into his life. People assumed that the man who lit up screens was untouchable, that the world's admiration was a shield against pain. But the reality was far more tragic, far more human, and far more complex. Every success he achieved on stage masked a personal struggle. Every standing ovation drowned out the quiet cries of a man yearning for understanding. It is this hidden story, the life behind the laughter, that we are about to uncover. A story of contrasts, of dazzling public triumphs shadowed by private sorrow. A story that starts with brilliance and ends in a quiet, haunting struggle that no one could see coming. And as we dive deeper into Milton Berle's life, you will begin to understand that the tragedy of this legendary entertainer is not just about fame lost or moments of heartbreak. It is about the human heart, the vulnerability behind the smile, and the immense courage it took to keep performing even when the world did not know the battles he was fighting. This is the story of a man who conquered television, who became an icon, yet whose personal life tells a tale far more emotional, far more suspenseful, and far more poignant than any comedy sketch could ever reveal. Each laugh he drew from audiences hid a secret struggle, and each performance was a shield against the emptiness he felt when the lights dimmed. Tonight, we embark on a journey to uncover the hidden truths, the scandals, the heartaches, and the resilience of a man who seemed larger than life, yet was profoundly human. A journey that will reveal the very essence of Milton Berle's tragedy and leave us questioning how much we truly know about the stars we admire from afar. Milton Berle's rise to fame was as rapid as it was dazzling, almost too perfect to seem real. Born in New York City in 1908, he was drawn to the stage from an early age, performing in vaudeville acts, theater, shows, and eventually making the leap to the new, untested medium of television. By the late 1940s, he had become the first true television superstar, a man whose presence could fill a room even through the tiny screen of a TV set. People did not just watch Milton Berle. They anticipated him, laughed at his every move, and celebrated his genius. Yet behind the curtain of applause and accolades, Milton was quietly battling insecurities that no one could see. Friends and family later revealed that he struggled with feelings of isolation, even when surrounded by adoring fans. He craved genuine connection, yet those around him often saw only the performer, never the vulnerable man underneath the perfectly crafted persona. The demands of fame were relentless. Each night, he had to be sharper, funnier, and more unpredictable than ever before, leaving little room for rest or reflection. Personal relationships suffered, and behind the laughter, Milton wrestled with profound self-doubt. He feared being exposed, feared that the persona he had built so carefully would crumble if anyone saw the cracks beneath. These invisible battles created a tension that would follow him throughout his life, a silent storm beneath the glittering surface of television's first great icon. And yet, even amid the struggle, Milton's brilliance could not be denied. Audiences loved him, critics praised him, and every performance seemed effortless, though it came at a cost few could understand. The duality of his life, the public triumph and the private turmoil, was the beginning of a story that would unfold with heartbreak, scandal, and moments of unexpected darkness. Each joke he delivered on screen was not just entertainment, it was a shield against the uncertainty that lingered in his heart. Each applause, each laugh, temporarily eased the weight of his insecurities, but only for a moment. Behind every comedic timing and every clever punchline, there was a man who feared losing relevance, who feared the day when the world might forget him, who feared that the laughter of millions could never fill the emptiness inside. And so, as Milton Berle conquered television, his personal life became a complicated maze of longing, regret, and hidden sorrow. This tension between public brilliance and private vulnerability is what makes his story so captivating, so tragic, and so profoundly human. The world applauded the entertainer, yet few understood the man who performed tirelessly while silently battling the fears and loneliness that fame could never cure. As we continue, the story grows darker, revealing the scandals, personal betrayals, and the emotional weight that Milton carried long after the cameras stopped rolling, showing us that even legends are not immune to heartbreak and human frailty. What happens when the applause fades? What happens when the stage lights dim? These are the questions that begin to reveal the true tragedy of Milton Berle, a man whose public triumphs could never fully shield him from private despair. As the years passed, the cracks in Milton Berle's life began to show in ways that the public rarely saw. Behind the dazzling costumes and the infectious laughter were moments of deep, private struggle. Rumors swirled about his relationships, some of which were public and celebrated, while others remained secretive and complicated, hidden from the eyes of an adoring nation. Close friends later revealed that Milton had a relentless obsession with control and perfection, a trait that made him a brilliant entertainer but caused tension and friction in his personal life. Finances, too, proved to be a complicated matter. Despite his immense success, there were times when monetary pressures surfaced, reminding him that even fame could not guarantee stability. But perhaps the heaviest burden of all was the constant fear of irrelevance. Milton understood that the entertainment world could be cruel and unforgiving, that audiences' tastes could change overnight, and that the applause he once took for granted could disappear in an instant. Anxiety crept into his life, masked by humor, by elaborate performances, and by the larger-than-life persona that audiences adored. Those closest to him remember moments when Milton would retreat into silence, overwhelmed by doubt and loneliness, a stark contrast to the energetic man the world thought they knew. Even as his career soared, these invisible battles intensified, creating a haunting tension that few could comprehend. Addiction, compulsive behaviors, and the pressures of maintaining perfection added layers of complexity to a life already burdened with expectation. Milton Berle became a man who could make millions laugh, yet he often struggled to find joy in his own life. This duality, the extraordinary public triumph and the private anguish, formed a delicate but dangerous balance. Each performance, each joke, each televised appearance was not just entertainment. It was a coping mechanism, a shield against the emptiness that followed him even into his most glamorous moments. The tragedy was not just that Milton faced these struggles, but that he faced them in silence, largely misunderstood by the world that celebrated him. And yet, his resilience remained undeniable. Despite the pressures, despite the betrayals, despite the relentless anxiety, Milton continued to work tirelessly, to perform, and to meet every expectation placed upon him. But beneath the surface, the story was more complicated, more haunting, and far more emotional than the audience ever realized. For every laugh he drew from millions, there was a private sorrow, a heartbreak that no one could hear, a fear that no one could see. And as we peel back these layers, we start to understand the magnitude of Milton Berle's tragedy. A man whose genius brought joy to countless lives, but could not always save him from the shadows of his own existence. The deeper we look, the more we discover that, behind the jokes, behind the fame, there lay a human being struggling against forces that even a legend could not fully control. A man whose life was as suspenseful and dramatic as any story ever told, yet far more heartbreaking because it was real. This is the story of brilliance shadowed by despair, a life where the applause never truly reached the heart, leaving us to wonder what Milton Berle endured when the cameras turned off and the laughter faded. Milton Berle's personal life was a landscape of turbulence, marked by heartbreak, isolation, and moments of deep vulnerability that the public rarely glimpsed. Despite his fame and the admiration of millions, he often found himself alone when the stage lights dimmed. Marriages came and went, friendships were tested, and the very persona that made him an icon also made it difficult for people to reach the man beneath the laughter. Those who tried to get close sometimes found themselves pushed away, intimidated by his sharp humor, his relentless energy, and the complexity of a personality shaped by decades of performing under constant pressure. Close confidants later revealed that Milton longed for intimacy and understanding, but struggled to allow anyone to truly see him. As he aged, health problems began to add a tangible weight to his emotional struggles, making him more physically vulnerable and amplifying the anxiety that had haunted him for decades. Behind the jokes and the glimmering suits, he wrestled with the fear of being forgotten, the terror that all his achievements might one day fade into irrelevance. And yet, even in the darkest moments, Milton maintained an outward bravado, masking his pain with humor, charm, and the careful construction of a public persona that kept the world smiling while he wrestled with despair. Friends recall moments when he would vanish from the spotlight, retreating into silence, reflecting on choices that had caused regret, and pondering the emptiness that fame alone could never fill. The tragic irony of Milton's life was that the very talents that made him famous, the energy, the humor, the charisma, also isolated him, creating barriers that few could cross. Even as tributes poured in, even as the world recognized his genius, he was often left to confront the quiet, personal battles that audiences never saw. There were nights when the laughter of millions could not soothe the loneliness he felt, moments when the applause faded, leaving him staring at the empty room of his own mind. These struggles extended to his relationships, where the pressures of fame, perfectionism, and an unyielding work ethic often clashed with the human need for connection and love. The world saw Milton Berle as a towering figure of television, larger than life, a man who could brighten any room with his presence. Yet few understood that behind the legendary performances was a man vulnerable to heartbreak, illness, and the inexorable passage of time. His story reveals the complex and sometimes cruel nature of celebrity, where triumphs on stage coexist with private suffering, where laughter can mask tears, and where the brightest stars can feel the loneliest. As we look closer, it becomes clear that Milton Berle's life was defined not just by his brilliance, but by the emotional weight he carried, the unseen battles that shaped his choices, and the private moments of despair that added depth, mystery, and heartbreak to the legend. The question that lingers, haunting and inevitable, is this: how does a man who brings joy to millions find solace for the sorrows that fame cannot erase? And it is in seeking that answer that we begin to glimpse the true tragedy of Milton Berle, a story of human vulnerability hidden behind decades of laughter, applause, and public adoration. The darker chapters of Milton Berle's life reveal how fame, while dazzling on the surface, can magnify loneliness, pressure, and personal torment. Behind the cameras and the bright stage lights, he faced betrayals, disappointments, and moments of deep regret that few could fully understand. Friendships faltered, business deals soured, and the very industry that had celebrated him could feel cold and unforgiving. Milton knew that public adoration was fleeting, that tastes changed, and that even a superstar could be forgotten overnight. This fear of irrelevance haunted him, lingering like a shadow even during moments of triumph. Personal choices, sometimes impulsive, sometimes driven by anxiety or the need for control, added to the weight of his struggles, creating a cycle of stress, regret, and temporary escape through humor and performance. As years passed, the pressure mounted, and the brilliant entertainer who could command millions with a single joke began to wrestle with the profound human cost of his career. Reports from friends and colleagues hint at periods of compulsive behavior, restlessness, and sleepless nights where Milton confronted questions that fame could never answer. Who am I without applause? Will anyone truly remember me? Can laughter mask the emptiness inside? These questions, haunting and relentless, defined his private reality, a stark contrast to the gleaming public persona that audiences adored. And yet, despite these trials, Milton's resilience was remarkable. He continued to perform, to reinvent himself, and to meet the expectations of a world that loved him, even when that very world could not perceive the depth of his internal battles. Each joke, each sketch, each show was both a triumph and a shield, a temporary respite from the emotional weight he carried every day. Yet the cost of brilliance was never far behind. The sleepless nights, the moments of isolation, the fear that all the laughter in the world could not repair the cracks within his heart. Milton Berle's story in these years becomes a delicate, haunting dance between achievement and despair, a testament to the paradox of fame. It brings visibility and admiration, yet it can magnify vulnerability and magnify isolation. The tragedy is not simply that Milton endured these struggles, but that he did so largely alone, hidden behind humor, charm, and a career built on making others feel joy while he silently carried his own sorrow. It is here, in these moments of tension between light and shadow, that the true weight of Milton Berle's life emerges. A man whose laughter became legendary, whose influence shaped generations, and yet whose personal battles remind us that even icons are human, that even the brightest stars can be haunted by shadows, and that the cost of brilliance is sometimes measured in private heartbreaks that the world never witnesses. In exploring these darker chapters, we begin to see not just the legend but the man, the vulnerabilities, the fears, and the silent suffering that make his story not only compelling, but deeply, heartbreakingly human. The tragedy of Milton Berle is not only in what the world saw, but in what the world never could see. And it is this hidden reality that continues to fascinate, evoke empathy, and leave an enduring mark on anyone who dares to look beyond the laughter.